Good morning. Can you hear me? Christina? Hey, Karen. Can you guys hear me?
I can. Hello. Good
Hey,
morning.
good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Okay. Okay. You guys ready?
I hope so. Yeah.
All right, there's Chelsea. Hey, Chelsea.
Good morning. You're muted.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Let's see how many people we have 20 participants. Wow.
Already.
Great.
Is Karen, are you going to share your screen to do the slides or
I think
Chelsea?
I'm gonna leave that up to Chelsea if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure. Let me go in and make sure I have to kind of flip between my work computer and my personal computer to do some of these
Oh
things.
gosh.
Yeah, it's because my personal computer has a video on it, which is nice, and my work laptop does not. So,
You did a really good job for the person the other day.
oh wait, which one?
I think it was the insurance person.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
Yeah, I noticed because when I was trying to do it myself and like read off to someone,
Mm-hmm.
there's such a delay, and I had to press the button like 3 times. And
Yeah.
then is that just are you experiencing that too when you're doing it?
I don't, but sometimes my internet gets a little laggy at times, which is a little frustrating because when you're trying to go through all these slides, it could be a little slow, I think, just because I have more than one person using my internet at any given time.
Oh
So,
gosh.
I know. It's okay.
Oh, someone's asking, where do you mute yourself?
Everyone should be muted, but if you're, so, say you're logged in on your computer, right? You should be able to kind of hover over your name, and then when you click, I believe if you click more, and the view is different from my end, so I won't be able to really tell. But if you click more or next to you, you should have like a little microphone.
So it looks different on mine, Chelsea.
Okay.
If you're looking at your screen, there's a little microphone that's all the way to the left-hand side. And so when I logged on, I was already muted, but if you click on it, you can mute and unmute yourself.
They might not have the controls that you guys do.
Is that a control or is it?
It is a control on the lower.
Can this panelist hear us talking about it right now? Because it's a panelist asking that.
Oh, it's a panelist.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, gotcha. No, I don't see her listed as a panelist.
Oh, no, she's asking, I'm sorry. She's asking the panelists. Oh, that's hilarious. They can hear everything.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know they can. Then,
okay, I can hear you all, but have no microphone control. That's from Russell.
Yeah, so no one should have microphone controls during the webinar itself. So if you have a question at the end of one of the presentations, if you have a question at the end of one of the presentations, then you can ask that either in the chat or the Q&A. Diane and I will be looking at both of those. And in addition to that, you can also rate, you should be able to raise your hand. And if you do raise your hand, I'm going to see that, and then I can unmute you as one of the hosts of the webinar. So let me go ahead and actually get started. I'm going to put Karen's presentation up, but I'm going to do a little intro. Looks like we have about 45 people have joined so far, which is great. Can everyone see Karen's presentation? Maybe just write it in the chat. Kelly,
They're saying
okay.
yes. They're
You
saying
can.
yes. Mhm.
Okay, great. Looks like a lot of people are saying yes. Thank you, guys. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining for yet another session of our Property Manager Case Manager annual meeting, which we are doing as a series of informational webinars throughout the month of October. So we're really excited to have this many attendees. The actual webinar, the registration was completely full. So I'm glad that there's such an interest in this subject area. I think it's extremely beneficial for people to know more about this. So hopefully it'll clear up any questions that you have, and you'll have the chance to ask questions from the panelists. We have two lovely panelists joining us today. Karen Scott from Habitat America. She will be doing a presentation about the 811 application and approval process. And then Christina Bolliard, who is actually from our department, the Department of Disabilities. She is our waitlist administrator, and she's also going to be weighing in and providing some more information on what the process looks like from our end. So it's going to give you two different perspectives. I'm Chelsea Heyman. If you don't already know me, I've realized I haven't introduced myself at the start of any of these webinars. But I am the Director of Housing Policy and Programs for the Department of Disabilities. So I work a lot with Christina, and we work in tandem with the Department of Housing and Community Development and the Department of Health to oversee the 811 program, Weinberg Apartments, Community Choice Homes, and the MFP Bridge Subsidy Program. That's Money Follows a Person Bridge Subsidy Program. So thank you everyone for coming today. I will go ahead and let Karen take it away. And Karen, just let me know if you want to advance a slide. You can just say next slide. That's fine.
Thank you, Chelsea. And
Yeah.
good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this presentation today. Again, my name is Karen Scott. I'm a regional property manager with Habitat America. I'm very proud to have been part of one of the first 811 programs in Maryland with Riverwoods at Tollgate, 2014. I think we opened in 2015. And we had 13 units at that property. Since then, I have added several additional 811 communities to my portfolio, and I now have a total of 51 811 units across 5 sites. So very exciting to be able to work with everybody from that point on and continuing today. So today we're going to discuss the inner workings of the 811 program from the property management perspective, from start to finish. For sake of time, please save your questions until the end. And if you have a question that we don't have the opportunity to answer, or at least until Chelsea opens the question opportunity, my email is also at the bottom. Feel free to email me directly if you have any questions that you'd prefer to ask separately. And I'll share that email again later. Slide, please. One of the first opportunities for all the players to meet and discuss the details of the 811 program is the kickoff call. Hopefully by the time that you have this call, you will have received your rental assistance contract and the closing documents for the property. Some of the questions that are answered during these calls tend to be the general questions about the program, such as, will there be an initial inspection prior to lease signing? So there is no third-party agency inspection and no pre-tenancy inspection, with the exception that the applicant must view the apartment and complete the move-in inspection report prior to signing the lease. A lot of times people want to know, well, what is the program similar to? What can I compare it to? Is it like NEDs, portable vouchers? The most similar comparison that I found is to the PRAC 202 program, except the 811 program uses the non-elderly disabled deduction rather than the elderly deduction. Some additional points to keep in mind along the general guidelines: there's no application fee charged, no late fees, no legal fees. You cannot accept applications from walk-ins for the program. If somebody is interested in applying for one of your 811 units, you'll refer them to Christina Bolliard. And your site team is only going to process application packets that are sent to you from Christina. While your applicant must demonstrate household income that doesn't exceed 30% of the area median income, the unit you assign doesn't need to be a 30% set aside. So you might have an 811 apartment that is a 50% set aside, and it's going to be one of your 811 units. While that is a 50% unit, your applicant always has to qualify for the 30% income restriction. So don't let that confuse you. One of the first concrete tasks of the property management team is to put together an application packet. And that's going to be submitted to the 811 team for review and approval. That's going to include your occupancy and screening standards, property specific information, general housing application, and any addendums that you might typically include. You're probably using a similar packet to give to any of your new applicants already. So you're just going to tailor this packet to your 811 applicants specifically. The parameters for your screening that will be included in that packet for credit and criminal can be a different standard for your 811 applicants. So for example, at one point we did away with running credit screenings, and we still use the criminal, but we didn't feel we needed to do the credit since it wasn't going to influence any approval process. We weren't going to use it for a basis of tenancy. Later, we learned that the 811 team had found the credit report to actually be a really good tool to identify if somebody, for example, was going to have difficulty putting utilities in their name. So learning from that, we now incorporate that credit check so that we can help that applicant identify and overcome any obstacles. The property management team also assigns the 811 units to the specific apartments. So typically the set aside and the designation is listed in the closing documents, but the actual unit number and the location designation is going to be set by the property management team, and that is up to you. In my experience, we often initially assign the 811 units to our UFAS units, so I usually start there. Although I might change the unit if the applicants don't request the features of a UFAS unit. And because these units are floating and not fixed, that's a great luxury to have, the fact that you can later change those units. Just, of course, you want to keep your original fractions, and if you make any changes, be sure to let your 811 team know about those unit assignments. Slide, please. Once the application packet is approved, Christina will share the packet with the case managers and the applicants. Christina will email your team the completed packet to process. And one of the greatest delays that we initially have with this is receiving back either incomplete or illegible information. So we want to really be sure when you're getting back that application, read every single line. Make sure you can see it. Make sure the photo ID is not so dark that you can't read anything on it. And you want to be sure that you do have all the proof of identity that's required by your background screening company. Slide, please. Once we're able to process the application packet, depending on the screening result, our team is either going to schedule the interview or send a notice of application denial. If your applicant passes the screening, be very careful about the wording that you're going to use to report that result. Many people here approved and they scheduled the moving truck. So we want to be sure that everyone understands that passing this screening portion is only one of the many steps in this process. Slide, please. The bread and butter of our processing is the verification of the income, the assets, and the qualifying deductions. I often compare collecting this information and really this whole process to baking a cake. And your income, your assets, and your qualifying deduction, that's your ingredients, maybe your eggs, your flour, and your sugar. This all starts with your application. Your application is likely going to ask every possible question about each of these categories. And the answers to those questions on your application is going to act like a roadmap to tell you what the next step is you need to take. Slide, please. One of the most important resources for any of us working really in affordable housing for the most part is the HUD 4350.3 manual. I cannot stress this enough. Bookmark of the tab. I'm going to have this address on multiple slides. And as my little star says, if you can see it on your screen, you can even just Google HUD 4350. So you're going to want to reference this a lot. This is going to have all of the answers right here. Slide, please. Your interview after your applicant has passed the background is also going to consist of completing these additional forms. And all of this information is also available on the HUD 4350. Slide, please. One of the most frustrating aspects for the paperwork process for everyone involved is the expiration of documents. As you can see here, the rule, the 120-day rule, is not a management rule. It is the 4350 rule. It is the HUD rule. The documents are only good for 120 days from the date listed on verification. There are some exceptions, and again, those exceptions are listed in the 4350, but it's just incredibly important to double check your dates. It's just no fun to request documents over and over because your forms have expired. Slide, please. So your first ingredient is your income, and this really comes down to knowing all the pennies. You have to know every single penny. And there are times where people are going to think you're extremely intrusive and they're not going to understand why you need to be in their business so much. But that is the rule. There is simply no way that we can qualify a person and ensure that they are within the 30% area median income restriction if we don't know all of their income, which means knowing all of their pennies. So again, your application is really the key to knowing what you have to ask to verify. And so if you have a yes on a particular income category, clearly that is the income category you're going to want to verify. Slide, please. As you work with the 811 program more, you're going to become very confident about how to calculate income for some of the special circumstances that we encounter with households. One of the most common that we've seen tends to be the applicant is currently in an assisted living facility or a nursing home. And so at the time of the application, their income may be going directly to that institution. And when they leave there and they're going to move into your community, that's going to change. So they're going to not only have the funds now going to them, but it's going to be a different amount. So the 4350, again, is going to outline what to do in almost every single scenario. And we overcome these sorts of obstacles as they come up. And of course, you always want to rely on your compliance team as well. Slide, please. There are also specific rules for whose income is going to be counted toward the total household income. And one of the notable exceptions is the live-in aid. And that is another aspect that is not uncommon with our 811 applicants. And so, of course, they are not technically a household member, so therefore their income's not going to be counted. And you'll need to verify the need for the live-in aid as well. As a side note, in a one-person household with the 811 program, the one-person household typically is only going to qualify initially for a one-bedroom apartment size. But that verification of need of live-in aid is going to allow for the two-bedroom size, for example. So we have a poll now. Can an applicant's adult child be their live-in aid? Who knows the answer? Chelsea, I have no idea how to check if people are responding.
So I'm sorry, and I have to like kind of shuffle between different screens when I do this. So if you all can answer this question in the chat, that would be great. Looks like we have a bunch of yeses.
The yeses are correct.
All right.
Good job.
Awesome. Good job, guys.
Slide, please. So assets are the next ingredient. And just like the income questions on the application, the answers given on the application about assets will lead you to the next appropriate verification needed. I often find that I have to clarify with applicants that are going to say no, they don't have a checking account or a savings account, that I have to actually ask them, well, are you really sure? And if I kind of poke around enough about it, then it's not uncommon to hear, oh, well, I only have $2 in that account. And so then we want to explain, again, going back to the every penny example, we want to know about those $2. So sometimes you really do have to dig around to get some of these answers. So additionally, a lot of my team members will request source documents at the time of the interview as backup in case they can't get a third-party document back from a bank very quickly. So, and that's a really fantastic practice and certainly time saving, so you're not having to go to that applicant later to ask for it. But when you have the applicant with you, if you are reviewing these statements, be sure to really scrutinize your deposits. If you have deposits showing on these statements, you're going to want to ask what these deposits are to avoid having to call them later or having your application packet kicked back from compliance because they're asking about these deposits that look like potentially an additional source of income. Slide, please. Deductions. After the total income is verified and annualized and the income from assets is verified and calculated, that brings us to the deductions. And the deductions are what is actually going to lower the income calculation that then allows us to come up with the total adjusted income. So it's this final figure that's used as the basis for the calculation of that monthly rental rate, 30% of annually adjusted income. Just like with the income and the assets section, your initial application is going to tell you what you need to know about the deductions that your applicant is eligible to receive. You're going to want to verify any of the yeses, just like with the income questions, just like with the asset questions. And so I have listed on this slide common deductions that we see frequently. And the key words here is going to be out-of-pocket costs. So this is what you're verifying. You want to actually see, for example, a pharmacy printout that shows 12 months of the out-of-pocket costs. And the best way you're going to get that is typically by having the applicant request it directly from the pharmacy. So those of you who are accustomed to verifying even income and assets, even if the deduction side is new to you, you know how important it is to just be very tenacious about finding the best way to get your verifications. So you might need to call a doctor's office with the applicant in front of you and tell them you're sending over a verification. Additionally, your verifications for income, assets, and deductions are really just your best bet for understanding exactly what you need answered in order to come up with the deduction information. So just like with all of this, the 4350 is your best friend, and it's going to detail all of this for you, give you really specific examples. But you are likely going to have verification documents that have already been developed in order to send out to these third parties, like a physician's office, and those are going to tell you exactly the questions you need to ask. We have another poll. All right, which resource is best to find very specific information and examples about deductions, including what can be included as acceptable sources of verification and exactly how to calculate the actual monetary deductions from income? Is your best resource for all this information going to be the 811 team, Chelsea, Christina, and Diane? B, your best friend, or C, the HUD 4350?
All right, looks like we have some responses trickling in now. We have a lot of C's for the 4350.
Good job, everybody. That's
Yay!
correct.
Paying
It is
attention.
the HUD 4350 is your resource. And in fact, the certifications that we take, I have the certified occupancy specialist certification, for example. That entire course is all about learning to navigate the 4350. So it's just that important. And you know, you lean on it, use it, it's there for you. All right, so slide please. Now that you've verified all of your income, your assets, and your deductions, and you've calculated it, you have a beautiful packet to send to your compliance department. And this is what I think of as baking the cake. You're putting all of it together. Because you've looked up everything and you've checked the 4350 for anything you weren't sure of, you know you're gonna have an approval when you submit to compliance. Slide, please. And we're done. It's approved on the first try. It's so easy. So I want to tell everybody that I showed this to someone and they completely did not understand my reference. So now I feel compelled to explain that the pigs are flying because this is likely not going to happen. You're going to work very hard on this application packet and you're going to submit it to your compliance department. And if your compliance department is like our compliance department at Habitat America, which has like the best of the best people, they're going to catch a bunch of things that there's no way you could have caught on that first try. Slide, please. So here we have a very disappointed ostrich because of these things that are commonly missed. So as you can see in the list, these don't always, some of them don't seem like they're complicated, but while the ostrich is disappointed, I understand how this happens, because you have interruption after interruption after interruption. You have this applicant wanting answers. You have all this stuff going on, and it is just so easy to miss some of these details. Then you have the things that aren't even within your control, when suddenly a new family member just drops out of the clear blue sky. And now you have to add them into all of your paperwork and verify everything anew. Or you have a new request to change, a 504 request, for example, to change bedroom size. So many things can happen. So just set your expectations so that you know this is possible. And I also want to suggest to everybody, use the opportunity when you're in that interview, that initial interview. You're your own captive audience then. And I have really found I catch my errors and oversights when I have the applicant in front of me during the interview, and I use that time to attempt to process the entire application with all of my compliance papers. Because it's going to be as I'm doing that I realize a pay stub has a 401k on it that somebody said they never had, or a box on one paper says no employment and the other paper says employed. And it's those things that otherwise in the haste can be missed. So that's my suggestion. Use that opportunity. And then you still have the person in front of you to clarify any questions that may pop up as a result of reviewing those forms. So now you're going to submit it again. And this time you have checked the 4350 like 3 times and you've reviewed everything. So you're confident. Slide, please. And congratulations, it's approved. Good job, you did it. It's fantastic. You are ready now to contact everybody that you've worked with, everybody that's worked so hard to make this happen. Slide, please. And so now you need to produce a welcome letter. A lot of our applicants in the 811 program might have some source of assistance to get their prorated rents or their security deposits, or they need a letter for a church to get furniture for their apartment. Whatever it is, these letters are very important, and you want to have this letter together that of course lets them know they're approved, and it needs to also include the unit number, security deposit due, prorated rent due on the day of the lease signing, if there is, full monthly rent amount due thereafter, and the tentative move-in date that's planned. One of the great things with the 811 program that I haven't touched on earlier is that you have this entire team with you. So as you're going through and you're trying to gather documents or you're getting corrections, you have not just the applicant to work with, but you have their caseworkers, their case managers, you have Chelsea, Christina, Diane. And so it's important to remember that they're not only there to assist you and to lean on and to help get information, but it's critical to also keep them in that loop throughout the process. So we typically have a weekly call or a bi-weekly call with everybody also. That's going to keep everybody updated. But when you're producing this letter, for example, they should also be included to receive this information. So hopefully this is a great day for everybody. You're going to sign your lease, you're going to sign all your documents, but of course you're not going to do any of that until the applicant, who is now your resident, has completed their move-in inspection form. That is always your very first thing. And you can take great pride in knowing that you've played this incredible role in helping this person who often is coming from very unfortunate circumstances or has really suffered a lack of independence, and you've played this integral role in helping them to regain that position through this home. And but this is actually not the end. Slide, please. We get to do it all again next year and every year thereafter, and for any interim certifications needed in between. So I do have, yes, so here again, of course, is the 4350 website. You can just Google it. You don't need to write down that exact site. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Remember to reference the 4350. Here is my email address to email me questions separately if you'd like. And Chelsea, I did send, if anybody really wants to get into this, I did send this like bonus slide
I
that
did see
really,
that. Yeah,
that really breaks down for anybody that's like, okay, well, great, but how do you actually get to the rent?
let me stop sharing this slide, and then I'm going to pull up the bonus slide. Okay, can everybody see that? Hopefully. Oh, no, let's see.
I can't see it.
You guys see that?
Okay, boom. There's
Okay,
so much here. So here is your cake, if you will. This is your final baked product. And this is just a portion. This is the HUD 50059. And it is, for HUD purposes, you know, we have the TIC, tenant income certification with tax credit, and with these HUD programs, we're using the 5.9. So you'll see number one is the reported income. And so you're taking this income, and this is all listed in the 4350, guys, okay? So you don't need to memorize this, but you're taking that income, then you need your 3% calculation, 3% of that income, right? And you have to find that out first because your deductions have to exceed that number. Then you're going to subtract that 3% from their income. And my Zoom bar is right in the way of all of my data. So just hang on, let me try to, I'm struggling to read my own notes. So this then, once you've done that, you can take the actual amount that they've told you is their out-of-pocket costs for their medical or their disability related deductions. And from there, you know, that has to exceed the 3%. And then there is the automatic deduction offered, the 400 that you can see. That is going to be added back in. That becomes the adjusted income. And then hopefully, I can't see any of my own information here. So hopefully you guys can work with me. It is counterclockwise. And so you're subtracting the total deduction. So in number 6, that's your adjusted annual income. So the slide previously, well, what the heck is adjusted annual income? Here it is. So now we go to that 30% figure. The rent is going to be 30% of the adjusted annual income. And then we're going to divide that by 12, and that's our monthly rent, which is in this case the total tenant payment. And now we come into the utility allowance, which is going to be subtracted, and that's how you're actually arriving at the tenant rent. And in case this is too wacky, don't forget the 4350 describes all of this. All right, and that is the end for me. Thanks.
Of course. I'm going to check and see if we have any chat, any questions.
We do have a couple questions.
Do you want to go through those, Diane?
Sure. There's one, what is the typical wait to obtain 811 housing?
Do you want me to answer that question, Karen?
Yeah, I'm gonna say that's for your side.
Yeah, so that is very challenging to estimate. What we typically tell people, and Christina can jump into, our wait list is sorted based on both time, date stamp, and priority category. So when we have a housing opportunity that comes up in a particular county, what we do is we search the wait list, which already automatically sorts people based on those two things. We search our wait list based on what bedroom size we have available in that new apartment building, and also the county that it's going to be located in. So people are automatically sorted based on that information. So I cannot give you an accurate, number as to how long the wait is. I can tell you our wait list is well over 1,500 people. So it is quite sizable, but it really depends on what the demand is in that county, the bedroom size that your client needs, and then also the other people that are on the wait list. It's possible that some might decline the housing opportunity, even though they have a higher priority, status, and they submitted an application years ago. So if that happens, then another person will be contacted about the housing opportunity. The best document to review, to look at regarding specific waitlist related procedures is our tenant selection plan. That is available on DHCD's website. I'm happy to send that out to the group, but it is our guiding document of how it is that we review our waitlist and how it is that we start to do outreach. Christina, did you want to add anything in there?
Sure. The only other thing that I would add into that is when we start working with a property, everyone needs to remember that we don't have all of the units at that property for Section 811. So, please keep in mind, because I get lots of calls where people say, oh, I heard this property's coming to, Baltimore City for the 811 program. And, we can look that up and, confirm that. The property could have 120 units, but we may only have 7 of those units for Section 811. It's not the entire building that, becomes part of the program. It's only a certain number that are set aside. So, please make note that, as Chelsea said, there's, 1,500 people on the wait list, and we're going to pull 7. So that's why it's impossible to give wait list numbers because of those priority categories and date and time stamps of applications. And 7 units against a 1,500, household wait list. It's just, it's impossible to give a time frame. What I wasn't sure, what I did want to follow up with the question, how long for housing once you submit an application, or is that, as the way that Chelsea and I just answered it, the time frame, from the time you put an application onto the wait list to get housing? So I just wanted to confirm what kind of time frame they really were looking for.
Diane, can you get?
Yeah, I'm waiting to see whether the person who asked that question is.
But I can, I guess it doesn't make a difference. I can answer. Chelsea and I, Chelsea mostly answered the very first question. If you're asking the time frame for when a person submits an application to the property for the actual unit, I would say, Karen, what do you think? A good 2 months, 3 months of process?
Well, really what the issue is not the processing time, because sometimes that can be, let's assume that somebody just has SSDI and they don't even have any bank accounts. So we're going to have an award letter from them, and that's going to go pretty quickly depending on how many other items we have to verify, assuming that there's no surprises like sudden new family members or new requests for reasonable accommodations, which would be related to policies and practices or procedures. So assuming we don't have anything pop up like that, that can be 1 week. It can be a matter of days. The problem is most of these units that I've worked with are new construction. And so really what's happening is you're up against the timeline, the construction timeline. And so we also, and it doesn't always happen, but it has happened where you have somebody that just goes completely MIA after they're approved, and now you've got to start all over again. And that does raise a really important point that one of the other aspects that separates this program as far as other programs that we're all working with in property management is you're going to be given a list from the 811 team of the order by which a priority order. So if you have 7, 8, 11 units at your property, you're going to have a list that's 1 through 7. And you want to be able to offer the number 1 person the opportunity to move, or, you know, that's going to be a priority. I do feel like sometimes that list, we can work with it concurrently. Christina or Chelsea, I'm going to ask you to kind of clarify that a little bit more, but that's not something that I've experienced in any other program, where if I have 7 apartments that I know are 8, 11 apartments, I may initially, because we want to be safe rather than sorry, get a list of 15 people. But those people are going to constantly say, when can I move? When can I move? And I actually can't answer that at all, because I need to push them back to the 811 team to answer that question because of these priority lists.
Right. And so any case manager or supports planner can come back and ask where their person falls on that list that's is working directly with the property for the 811 program. And we can let you know where they fall. And just to let someone know that submitting an application is not a guarantee that they're going to be offered that 811 unit, because we do submit more applications than we have units, just because of lots of different factors that we've experienced over the last couple of years with people applying for units. So hopefully that answered those time frames.
Thank you both for those detailed explanations of how that process works and plays out. And Christina's presentation is going to go into a little bit more detail about what happens on her end, so what her process is like, which is, as Karen referenced, a little different from what happens, of course, on the property management end. We do have a handful of additional questions. I'm looking right now at the chat. I know we have one in the Q&A as well, but the next one I have in the chat is, where will this presentation be posted? We will provide, as long as the presenters are okay with this, we can provide copies of the slides after the presentation, but it will also be recorded. I am currently kind of working out on our website as to how we can add in an additional tab that will have links to all the videos of these different webinars, the whole series. So once I get that sorted out and get them uploaded to YouTube, I can post them on the MDOD, the Department of Disabilities website. And there will be a link to indicate that there are training resources, webinars available for viewing. The next question I have is, why is 30% income level required if set aside standard is 50%? Karen, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so that has to do with the program eligibility requirements for the applicants within the 811 program. And so I use that example just to point out that the tax credit guidelines and rules are completely separate from the 811 rules. And that's really the answer. But if that's not a sufficient answer, please feel free to reach out to me separately, and I'm happy to go into greater detail. But the one is essentially a tax credit rule, and the other is an 811 rule.
Great, thank you for explaining that. We have another question. Why is the 3% income amount deducted from total medical expenses?
That's the threshold that is set in the 4350, which is my way of saying I have no earthly idea why that is. I just know that the 4350 says so. So if there's any compliance people on here that want to jump into that question that can answer it, feel free. But I know that because that's what the 4350 says.
Gotcha. Thanks for explaining that. I know that there's a constant kind of comparison between both the 4350 and some of the guidelines about LIHTC that are issued from the IRS. So it's always kind of like this, you're constantly thinking about both that document, and then the property management is looking at the 4350. And the 4350 is detailed. I mean, there's so many questions answered in that document. It's also massive. So I don't recommend printing it, but it's a really resourceful and helpful document to take a look at. Okay, another question. If you do not receive resource coordination services, would you be eligible for 811? I think this is more of a MDOD question. So I'll go ahead and just weigh in on this. So part of the requirement for applying to the program is that someone has a case manager that's assisting them through the process. I think that that's the most important thing. Services are voluntary, of course, and once the person moves into the unit, they may decide that they don't want to receive case management services anymore, and that's a decision that the person makes. However, to actually be able to register an account in Social Serve, our waitlist registry system, and to be able to actually help someone to actually have that person apply, they have to have an assigned case manager who's helping them through the process, whether that be a supports planner, staff from a residential rehabilitation program licensed through the Behavioral Health Administration, a person who is assigned to that individual to work with them. It could be staff from a center on independent living who are helping them with other independent living skills. So it varies depending on the person and what services they need. So if you have questions or you're not sure if the services that you're providing would perhaps fall under that resource coordination category, you're welcome to reach out to any of us on our team, and we're happy to answer those questions. Christina, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No.
Can I add?
Sure, yeah, please.
So for the property management side, I think it is a very important aspect to understand that while the applicant in the 811 program, to be eligible to participate in the 811 program, initially is going to have that partnership of those supportive services. After they move in, they do not have to elect to participate in that anymore. Their willing participation in their own services is not a condition of tenancy. And so it can be a great feature to have for them, and it can be an extremely helpful feature for the management team, but they also can refuse after they move in.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, I mean, you know, you are your own client's advocate. If you're a case manager attending this, then, you know, you understand that you are an advocate for the person that you're working with, and that assistance with getting through the leasing process is critical for helping someone transition into the community successfully. I mean, when you think about someone who maybe has never leased an apartment before, has lived in a nursing facility for many years, the experience that that individual is going to have will be quite overwhelming, and it's necessary to have those kinds of supports initially. And it helps facilitate people becoming more independent and being able to live in the community, and perhaps not needing the same level of supports that they had maybe when they initially applied. So I do think that it's a huge critical part of the program and helps people be successful. Okay, another question here. What happens when a person goes over the 30% later, such as that annual, and I assume that's annual recertification? That's a Karen question, I think.
Their income, it's a really good question. So, you know, I'm not seeing this with the 811 program. And so I don't have a great answer. I can tell you that they need it for the initial eligibility, and that they can become I'm trying to think back to the other programs where I do see this, where that's similar. So it really does depend on that program. But what is going to happen is they're going to pay that 30% of their annually adjusted income. And then you can, do we have, I want to research this question for sure. There are some programs where you can end up paying market rate. You can end up paying more. So I'd like to better research that and answer that.
So I think we've had this happen at one other property for the 811 program, and the household ended up qualifying for, I believe it was a 60% unit, if I'm not mistaken, based on what their income had changed to. So they were given the option, to either, find a new, place to live. They could find their own apartment at another, property. The property was willing to, move them to, or let them know about other units in their portfolio that they would qualify for if they didn't want to stay at that complex. Or they could stay in that apartment, but have the rent, because those units float, the rent was just,
Right, you would just reassign that.
Right, they reassigned the unit. So like I said, I believe that they then qualified for a 60% unit. So the rent was just adjusted, and then a new unit would be given to the 811 program when, one became available. So it hasn't happened often. Out of 200 households, I think it's happened once. So, when it does happen, properties are, more than welcome to, let us know what's happening, and we can work together to figure out a solution to it.
I have one of my lovely peer regional property managers is saying that they're jumping in to help with the answer to that, and she's more familiar with those programs. The majority of my portfolio otherwise is tax credit, so I just have these 811s. I can tell everybody we did have it happen where they initially turned out not to qualify for the 30%, and we did do exactly what Christina described, where we then said, you don't qualify, but it was caught initially. You don't qualify at this, and so are you interested in a different apartment that has a higher income threshold? So that's what we did in that instance.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's my understanding that based on courses that I've done, that it won't necessarily put a property out of compliance if that occurs, but the person then has to be converted over to a higher income apartment, and then the next apartment goes to an 811 participant, next available one. I believe that's kind of how it's been handled in the past. Okay, so I'm kind of going through the chat and answering some questions there as well. I see we have a person who has their hand raised. I think I've answered a handful of questions that some individuals had. There is one that is a Karen question that I wanted Karen to answer. Do you verify disability status for those that do not get Social Security that has it noted on the benefit letter?
They're going to come to us already having qualified on that basis. So they're not even going, the person won't even be referred to us initially without meeting those qualifications.
Right. Okay. Another question here. Do you have to send recertification paperwork to MDOD each year? We don't collect that. No. The property does. They need that.
Yes. I don't think you guys want that.
Mm-mm. No, it's something the property needs for compliance purposes, for the specifically related to, really both 811, but more like also tax credit rules as well. So let's see here. Another question we have, can the earned income disregard be applied after award?
I'm not sure I understand that question, but I'm going to refer you to the 4350.
That sounds like a good answer. Okay, another question coming in It was my understanding that once applicant qualified for 811 program, then if their income were to exceed 30% limits, they were still eligible to remain in the 811 unit. I believe this came up in Chester County, Pennsylvania. Does anyone want to weigh in on that? Because I don't believe that that is accurate. I'm not sure. Karen?
That sounds, at least in my experience, more like tax credit.
Yeah.
The low income housing tax credit rules. But again, it's not something I've personally encountered, but it sounds as if, since that is an eligibility requirement, it sounds like it's an ongoing income eligibility requirement and not just an initial income eligibility requirement. But I also can't speak to anything in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the program is operated in Pennsylvania. We do have people that we can reach out to that we work with, that we have a relationship with in Pennsylvania, and get more information about how it is that they do that. Diane, did you want to weigh in? I saw you unmuted yourself briefly. Diane, did you want to make any comments about that? Okay. All right, I don't see her unmuting.
Here I am, finally. I could not find my mouse. If you know what I mean, it was floating around. You know, we've done some research on this question with HUD, and my understanding is that nationwide, you know, program-wide for the HUD 811 PRA program, if you go over income, you're no longer eligible for the rental assistance through the HUD PRA program, but you may still be eligible, as everyone has said, to lease a tax credit unit at the same property. And you could even be income eligible to lease the unit that you're residing in, particularly the 40% unit.
Right. It could be a at a different AMI level, area median income. It could be at a different income level. So if your income goes up, then your rent is going to change. Obviously, this program is, as Karen showed, income calculations are extremely important. It determines the amount of rent that the person pays. So, so yeah, that's just an inevitable part of the process. I wanted to jump over to the Q&A because I see someone entered a question here. Are all assets and ABLE accounts factored in as total income?
The information for the assets, it's really coming down to the income from the assets. And so that is, you know, for example, interest that's accrued so long as you don't go over $5,000. And these applicants typically aren't going to have, you're really not going to have a lot. I don't think I'm familiar with was there a specific asset cited in this question?
So the ABLE accounts are a bit different than, you know, somebody's, it's like an account, a special account that somebody uses to be able to have some additional savings. So that way they have a little extra money aside from just their regular SSI check that they can use for different reasons. Usually, you know, it's disability related expenses, but that's a fairly broad definition. My understanding is that they would not be counted in a person's income. It would be considered, I don't even know if it's actually considered part of somebody's assets, but those are the ABLE accounts themselves are related to tax rules. So
Yeah, it is not considered an asset, and the funds in that are not considered an asset or income.
that's what I thought. Yeah. Yeah. So it would not be, no. So yeah, it is a little bit different. They're new. They came out in 2017, like really rolled out in Maryland in the last couple of years. So it's a new thing for sure.
There is HUD guidance on how to treat ABLE account funds that was issued last year. HUD took a little while, a couple of years actually, after the ABLE Act was passed to issue guidance. But we can take a look at that, or you can Google the HUD guidance on ABLE accounts.
Yeah, if you all have any questions or you want a copy of that, we're happy to share that with the group. Another question here, is there any plans to expand the 811 program to other housing markets? And in other words, private, other property managements and developers for increased opportunities? I'm not sure what this question means. I mean, so HUD 811 units, they are based in low-income housing tax credit properties. So properties that are either, they could be rehabilitated properties that receive low-income housing tax credits to be able to fund the rehabilitation of the property, or it could be a brand new building that was funded through low-income housing tax credits as a way of being able to finance the property. So it doesn't, I'm not sure what you mean by private or other property management. There's many property management companies that are involved in the 811 program. So Habitat America is one of them, but there's many, many others that we work with a lot. There's a lot of them that are involved in the program. Development companies vary as well, depending on the project, and depending on, what markets that development company works in. They might only work in, I don't know, Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware or something like that. But it's a nationwide program, the low-income housing tax credit. 811 only exists in certain states because it is a program funded through HUD, and it's a competitive grant through HUD. So states apply for it, whenever a notice of funding availability is issued. So essentially, it's a program that we're always trying to continue applying for as a resource for the state, but it doesn't function in the way of like an annual appropriation that we receive through the federal government. It's not something that is like a guaranteed surefire resource like maybe housing choice vouchers that a public housing authority receives. The 811 program is a little different than that, if that makes any sense. But there's several grants that HUD offers that are competitive grants that any state agency has to apply for and see if they can get that funding. And 811 is a program that only certain states have. So hopefully that answers your question.
If I can just add a couple of things to that, Chelsea. So
Sure.
Property management companies are not applying for 811 funds.
Mm-hmm.
And typically when I hear like private landlords, so, someone purchases a home and maybe rehabs it and makes, 4 separate units in the house, that wouldn't be someone that would typically apply for 811 funding. In our experience, it's been development. So developers are the ones that are participating in the program. They've applied to receive those fundings, as Chelsea stated, with the low-income housing tax credits. So, I get a lot of phone calls, and I'm sure, Chelsea, you do as well, of, somebody has a home, they have a couple of units that they want to rent out separately to individuals, and they want to apply for 811 funding. So that's not the typical private landlord that that's what I would categorize that as, a private landlord that's going to apply for 811 funding and receive funding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is Diane. I just wanted to add that it's a HUD requirement that 811 funding be used in developments that are created through the low-income housing tax credit program or other state affordable housing financing, such as the bond programs that are available in Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's significant variation. I mean, even from like one public housing authority to another, there's some public housing authorities that only manage public housing. There's some that have housing choice vouchers and a combination of public housing. So to say that there's like a universal, I don't know, standard, it can be kind of tricky, but we know what the rules are with the 811 program, and it's something that it's underwritten into the tax credit deal when it closes. So it's a developer is getting that guarantee that they'll have 811 units in their project. They might not know specifically how many they are. It's something that could be worked out, and sometimes changes as well. Like it could be, some developers might initially start out thinking they're going to get 10 one-bedrooms, but then they have some 2-bedrooms that they work into it instead. So it varies. It varies in that process. Someone had stated here in the Q&A, you may want to suggest if they are speaking about a private owner who is renting, they may look into contacting their local housing authority for a portable voucher recipient. That's a good point. And that kind of gets at the point that Christina mentioned, that, you know, some of those private landlords, they may be willing to accept Section 8 vouchers that a public housing authority issues to a person. And that process is very different from at least how 811 functions with respect to low-income housing tax credit developments. All right. Let's see, are there any other questions that people would like to bring up before we move on to Christina's presentation? Okay, Christina, are you good to control your own slides, or would you like for me to do that?
Nope, I think I am good. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And
Try and make sure I'm okay.
how's that? Everybody see my screen?
I can see your name.
Uh-oh. Share screen. Okay.
Christina, I think, and Chelsea, if I make Christina a co-host, will that help her share screen?
She should still be able to do it even as just a panelist. So let me, I know you had sent your presentation, Christina, because I had taken a peek at it as well.
I'm going to resend it to you because I added one of Karen's slides.
Oh, okay.
So give me 1 second.
All right. While Christina is doing that, I just wanted to let everyone know that we have another webinar coming up next Wednesday, the 21st, same time, same place. But keep in mind that the links to these webinars to actually register are different. So make sure you register individually for each webinar. You will not be able to, for example, re-access this new webinar with the link for this one. As an example, we had some issues with that during the last one. But the upcoming webinar is for next week is called Label Jars, Not People. And we're going to be also going through Tenant Training 101. So the Label Jars, Not People presentation will be done by some of the Centers for Independent Living, the CILs. And then the Tenant Training 101 will be a combination of MDH's staff, the Department of Health, and MDOD staff. And we're going to be going through what the basics are of essentially tenant training and what we do as part of that process. So one of the things that we do with all new residents for 811 in Weinberg is a tenant training, usually done in person. And it helps orient them to the apartment, the rules of the community. We talk about different issues like potential, overnight guests that the person might have and what the policy is for that, smoking policy, things of that nature. So that should be hopefully really helpful. And we're looking to create more of an in-depth training around tenant training and how to actually do tenant training independently, so you're able to take on that role and responsibility yourself. And that should be upcoming. So we're going to be working on that and try and get that out to everyone. Christina, were you able to email me your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, let me pull that up. So again, this presentation will be done by Christina Bulliard, who is our waitlist administrator for the Department of Disabilities. And many of you probably know her name. She interacts with both the case managers and the property managers constantly when she's leasing up a new unit for the program. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, Christina, just let me know when you need me to advance a slide.
Okay. Oh, we're not doing like full presentation mode. Okay. So my name is Christina Bulliard. I am the waitlist manager for the Section 811 program, as well as the Weinberg and Money Follows the Person Bridge subsidy waitlists. On that first slide, those are just a couple of developments that we have worked with for the Section 811 unit. So some of those pictures might look a little familiar to some of the property management companies that are on the phone. So we appreciate all of those developers and property management companies that have participated in the program and housed many of our waitlist applicants, our households on there. I think we have over 200 households that are currently housed through the program, and we have about 130 more to go. Next slide. Can I? Did it go to the next slide?
Yeah, can you see that? Eligibility.
Nope.
Can anyone else see that?
No.
No, we just see the, we're not seeing it in the slideshow mode. We're seeing it in.
I see it in the slideshow mode. Let me see what's going on.
Windows, maybe.
I mean, I can't. Can you see that?
Yeah. Now we can see the eligibility screening and referring.
As a slideshow?
No.
I mean, I can't do anything. I don't know why it's not doing that, because I'm not doing anything different than what I did for Karen's presentation. So I don't really know how to fix that. I can try to stop sharing and then redo it again, but I did make it such that all panelists should be able to share. So Christina, if you also wanted to try to do the sharing on your end, that's fine too. This doesn't work. Can you see it now?
It was better before, Chelsea, because now we can't see the whole frame.
Okay.
There, that's better. Yep. That's good. Right there. Stop.
Can you see it as a PowerPoint?
We see it as the individual slide with the preview mode. So it's not slideshow, but it's okay. If you're using two screens, that's why. Because it'll do it on the one screen and it'll present slideshow on your second screen.
Anyway, I think we're good to go.
Okay.
We're good? Okay, so for case managers and supports planners and coordinators of community service that are entering applications onto the wait list, many of you are familiar with the social serve program that we use for that online registry for the wait list. So this system is used for I'm going to call everybody case managers, but we could mean supports planner or coordinator of community service. So those case managers are going to log into their account and pre-screen to make sure that their clients are eligible for the program, and it will even let them know which housing programs they can submit applications for their clients onto that wait list. Next slide. I'm going to assume that that's on the next slide, but I don't see that on my screen. So I'm just going to keep going. So for individuals who, for case managers that are submitting that application onto the wait list, there's a couple of pre-screening things that have to happen when they're looking at entering an application. So they're going to put in a date of birth, which is going to confirm someone's age, because the program is for individuals who are able to sign a lease between ages of 18 and 61. So just as a little side note, those applicants have to sign a lease before their 62nd birthday. If in the leasing process they happen to turn 62 before they can sign the lease, unfortunately, they're not going to be eligible for the program because they've turned 62. For those individuals who are in the program, who do turn 62 while in an 811 unit, they age in place. Individuals or tenants are not asked to leave the program. We do ask for the Medicaid number because that confirms the eligibility, and we verify that information with the Department of Health. Income is entered, the total household income. So there will be a part in the application process if there are if it's more than just one person in the household, their income needs to be added in as well. And then the household size. There are only 2 questions that are asked in that pre-screen application for the wait list, and it's if someone is a lifetime registry sex, or that they have to that it's a requirement that they're on the lifetime sex offense registry, and if they've ever been convicted of methamphetamine production on a federally assisted property. For property management companies, we do not verify that information. We do not run a background check, criminal or credit, for applicants. So that is actually something that would have to be done on the property level once they get to the application stage with the property. Individuals can select the counties that they are interested in living in, and they can only select 5. So we used to have the wait list open, the application open, so that people could pick all 24 jurisdictions, but we have found that everybody is not willing to live in all of those jurisdictions. So we have since taken it back down that people can only select up to 5. And then there is a section on the pre-screen application for supportive services and programs that the applicant is enrolled in. And it's a variety of programs. So it could be anything from the community options waiver to community first choice to the Department of Disabilities attendant care program. It could be a residential rehab program, or I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that are on there. It could be any of the programs from the Developmental Disability Administration, things like that. And there's a list of those on there. And then we ask for the individual's current living situation. So it could be anything from being institutionalized in a nursing facility to residing in a group home to being homeless. And based on that current living situation is actually how the priority category is determined on the application. Next slide, please. So we start the leasing process with actually DHCD. So they usually let us know how long a property is going to take to build. We typically know from DHCD when properties are almost finished their construction, which is when we reach out to a property management company Sometimes because we've worked with a lot of the same property management companies, we actually don't wait for DHCD to let us know. We kind of reach out and find out our own time frames so that we know when a development is going to be ready for lease up. So we'll set up a meeting with those properties and we have a conversation to discuss things like, what is the 811 program? Who's eligible for the program? We find out information about the property, things, you know, who's the utility provider, who has internet and cable, who has, I'm trying to think of some of the other things. Is it a garden style apartment? Is it an elevator building? How many units do we have there? The unit sizes, things like that. We discuss the resident selection plan that the property is going to be able to create so that we can give that as part of the application packet to tenants or to applicants that are applying. We go over the reasonable accommodation policy. And I think Karen had gone over this as well. There's no application fee for the Section 811 program. And when it comes to rent, there's no late fees and the security deposit calculations. MDOD also works with the property management company to, in the process, because we typically start about 5 or 6 months before they're ready for lease up. Some of the stuff can, you know, take a little bit of time to go back and forth with application packets and that resident selection plan, and, you know, making sure that, you know, there's nothing in there that isn't going against the 811 program and things like that. So we go back and forth until that's ready. And once, usually while we're in that process of reviewing and finalizing that packet, we will start outreach to applicants from the wait list. So essentially we're kind of just creating an interest list before we have that final application packet to make sure that we have enough applicants to apply to that property for the program. And then once we have that completed application packet, we'll send that to the case manager, who will either, you know, send it on to their applicant or to their client, or assist them with completing the application. And that's typically a 14-day turnaround to complete the application, sign it, return it with either a valid ID or driver's license and their social security card. And we also try to set up weekly or bi-weekly calls with the property management company just to discuss things. How is the property coming along? When do you think you want to start signing leases? What are the statuses of applicants who have applied with that criminal and credit background check? All of those types of things. Next slide, please. And this goes into a little bit of information that Karen had discussed in her presentation as well. So, you know, before anything can really be done, you guys, the property management company needs that RAC. They need that rental assistance contract that's been signed and ready to go. We have to have that application packet, you know, for review and approval. The property is going to assign units and let us, you know, because those units can float, we usually want to get units that are on the first floor if it's a garden style apartment so that they can have a flat, no step entry. We'll find out what that utility allowance is from the property management company so we can provide that information to the case managers for their clients. The property is going to do that EIV report, that enterprise income verification for each of the applicants. And in addition to each of the applicants, you know, just want to point out to the case managers that that actually gets run on anybody that's in the household as well. And I know that it was on your slide, Karen, but I don't recall if you actually talked about it, but it made me think about it for this, that EIV also verifies if subsidy is being received for any of the other household members or the person that's actually applying. It becomes important for that verification because it's considered double dipping. You can't have people receiving multiple subsidies for their unit. So it's important for households that have children and, you know, 2 parents. So maybe, you know, somebody's on the other parent's subsidy and that becomes, you know, part of the issue. So there's no double dipping. So I know that EIV report is important for that as well as income. And then we talk about when that building will be delivered, because we want to know what that target date is for when that property needs all of those leases signed by. So for instance, if a property says, we want all of the leases signed by, October 31st, MDOD is going to help in any way possible to make sure that those leases are signed and by October 31st, so that, because that's the property's deadline. They want all of their units leased up and have leases signed by that date. So it becomes our goal as well. So that's something that we talk about with the case managers when we start having calls with them, and we'll get into a little bit more information about that in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So I think that we discussed this. I think it was one of the questions it came up that we've talked about the selection process as far as, so let's say a property, we've had conversations with the property. We know that there's going to be a unit or a property that's being built in Baltimore City, and we're going to start outreach. We're going to look at the wait list and we're going to sort it by Baltimore City and by the unit sizes that we have. So let's just say it's going to be 5 one-bedroom units. We're going to look at anybody that's on the wait list who has said that they want to live in Baltimore City and who need a 1-bedroom unit. And we're going to run that list, and we're going to start contacting case managers who are connected to that application so that we can let them know about this housing opportunity to find out if their client is interested in applying. The wait list does get sorted by the priority categories, which were determined by that current living situation. And if anybody is not familiar with the priority categories, priority 1 are individuals who are living in an institution. So it could be a nursing facility, it could be a state psychiatric hospital, it could be one of the 2 developmental disability centers that are in Maryland as well. Priority 2 is individuals that are at risk of becoming institutionalized because anything from their healthcare status has changed and they are no longer able to, they're homebound. They're not able to get in and out of their unit like they were before. They're not able to make modifications to their home because their health has changed, and for whatever reason their home again becomes homebound. Priority 3 is made up of individuals who are either coming out of a Developmental Disability Administration's group home, a residential rehab program through the Behavioral Health Administration. The Traumatic Brain Injury Waiver has alternative living units, and the Department of Health has assisted living facilities that are approved. That makes up that priority 3 category. Priority 4 is our homeless population, and that is even broken down into 5 other categories that are determined by the Hearth Act. Once those applications are submitted, it will give a date and time stamp. So then that when we run the list for a unit, it's even broken down into the date and time stamp based on those priority categories. So it's very fine-tuned. Next slide, please. So we've got the selection process. So we have an applicant that's been selected for the unit. We know that the case manager has said that they are interested in getting the application. So we send that on to the case manager. They complete it. The case manager is going to send it back to someone on the 811 team. Again, there's no application fee. We're going to send that to the property manager, and the property management company is going to run that criminal and credit background report, criminal and credit background check. And there's a couple of things that go into that background check. So there's the criminal background check, the credit history, rental history, that EIV, and then there's even a third-party income verification that is completed during that time. I think if you go to the next slide, we have a little thing about prompt responses are crucial, which we agree. And next slide. So I'm just gonna, oh no, go back. Just one second. I'm gonna jump on my soapbox here for a second, and with a little bit of help for our property management companies to let you know how important documentation is. We cannot stress documentation, documentation, documentation. So it's, even with that initial application packet that comes back, it is super important for applicants to have a valid ID or driver's license, a social security card, because those are the two things that are going to be needed to run that initial background check that the property is going to do. So if they don't have a valid ID or driver's license, you know, sometimes property management companies are willing to work with us to have some type of other identification. It could be a passport. It could be, and if Karen, if you want to jump in with some of the other things that are acceptable, I know that we've used some other things.
Christina, I'm going to again reference the HUD 4350.
Oh, 4350. Okay.
I'm just going to give a
I know.
complete list.
A complete list. Yeah. So we usually come to the property management company and they will let us know what is acceptable. And I'm sure that you guys are using that 4350 to find that information out. You know, it just as a little, sidebar with the pandemic, things have been a little bit slower to open back up. So I know, MVA is getting, only doing appointments for certain things. So, some applicants have had, dates set, in November. And the property management companies have been great about working with us if they did have an expired ID until they get that new one. So, the pandemic has definitely created some workarounds for the application process. And we are very, very grateful to those property management companies for working with that. Some of the other documentation that is going to be needed, once we send that application to the case manager, we sort of let you know, we send a list that says, here are some other things that you should have your client start working on getting if they don't already have. And it's going to be a birth certificate. So everybody that's in the household that's applying needs that social security card. Everyone that's in the household needs that birth certificate. So those can be some things that take some time to get. Maybe not the social security card. I think the turnaround time is relatively quick for that. Birth certificates, on the other hand, can take some time because it's something that, if it's not in Maryland and you need to go out of state and, they have a completely different process than the state of Maryland, it could, take some time to get that birth certificate. And those are all things that could hold up the application process and could potentially have an individual not be approved and offered a unit because those things are needed. So they're not, they're not things that we're trying to keep people from, being housed, but, just be aware that those are documents that the property management company needs in that file that, before they can give approval. Even things as far as Social Security award letters, making sure that it's not more than 90 days old. I understand that maybe somebody got their new award letter back in February, maybe back in January of 2020. It's outdated. So somebody's going to have to call Social Security and get an award letter that's dated, in October of 2020. So it's not, we're not trying to put up barriers. It's just how things are. The documentation has to be new. It has to be current. So, just make sure that, they have those award letters. If people are working and they have earned income, they need 6 consecutive pay stubs. If someone is divorced, they're going to need that divorce decree. If there's, children in the household, you're going to need custody documentations, child support information. Even if your client is not receiving child support, they're going to need a printout that states that there's no child support, coming in. Bank statements, and that even includes if they have a direct express card for their Social Security, they're going to need a recent receipt that shows the amount that's there. They're going to need documentation for food stamps and TANF, just as a heads up to start working on collecting a lot of those. Okay, we can go to the next slide, I think, please. So as we run that list and we know who has passed the criminal and credit background check, we're going to send a list to the property so that they know in what order units can be offered to the applicants. And I know Karen mentioned this in her statement or in her presentation as well. Approved by the property is different than approved to move in. So when a property says that your client has been approved, it just means that they've passed the criminal and credit background check, they've had that interview, they've sent all of the paperwork to the compliance department, and they have all the necessary documents, they have all the signatures that they need in the paperwork and the file. And for the compliance department, that section of the property management company, that file is approved. That is different than being MDOD approved. So once we know from the property who has passed everything, who has all of their paperwork, whose file has been approved by compliance, we will then tell the property, okay, if there's 5 units at the property, the first 5 people that are on that list that have all of their documentation, who have a file approved by compliance, these first 5 people can be offered units. And as I stated earlier, and I think Karen mentioned this as well, we always try to send over more applications than we have units. So if there are 5 units, we're going to try to send over 10 applications. Submitting an application for a Section 811 unit is not a guarantee that your client is going to be offered the unit. And at any time, a case manager wants to know where their client falls on that wait list for the property, give us a call. We can give you that information. There's lots of reasons why we send over more applications, because lots of things happen for people at different stages through the application process. Sometimes it's a, health status change. Sometimes family, isn't on board with somebody moving, for whatever reason, or maybe somebody checks out the property and decides that they don't like the neighborhood. They don't like that there's, no transportation close by. They don't like that, their family can't get to them, lots and lots of different things. So there's so many things that could happen, which is why we send over more applications than we have units. So please be aware that submitting that application is not a guarantee that somebody is going to be offered a unit through the Section 811 program. But if they are offered the unit, the property is going to send a welcome letter, and it's going to include things like their address, what the rent's going to be, what their security deposit is. For anybody that is not familiar with the Section 811 program and how security deposits are calculated, that security deposit is, and this is directly from the HUD lease, the security deposit is an amount equal to 1 month's total tenant payment, or $50, whichever is greater at the time of the lease signing. So we hold property or case management calls that are specific to each property. So we will address any of those questions that come up if you want to figure out how, how the rent is calculated, how the security deposit is calculated. 3 of the big things that we want to make sure that the property managers are using during that lease signing is the HUD 811 lease is used, the HUD 811 move-in inspection form, and there is a 811 addendum to the lease for medical reasons. And if we can go to each slide, I have just the first page of each of those documents. So this is the first page of the HUD 811 lease. There's a link to DHCD's website that will actually take you to a full copy of that 811 lease and what it looks like. We also have a copy of just that first page of the move-in and move-out inspection form. So as Karen said, there is no formal inspection that has to be done by the state, but before someone signs a lease for the 811 program, we encourage them to use this move in and move out inspection form to make sure that, everything is, good to go for that move in before they sign that lease. And then as part of that lease, we want to make sure that that addendum is included, and that addendum protects the person signing the lease, that if something should happen and they have to go into a hospital nursing facility, that their unit will be held for them for 180 days. Just as a reminder, tenants are still responsible for their portion of the rent and their portion of the utility bills, but this addendum essentially holds that unit for them for that 180 days until they're able to come back into the unit. But if they should not be able to come back to their unit, we can have a conversation of how things will happen and what's going to happen with them and that unit. And I included a link for each one of these documents. They're all on DHCD's website if you want to check those things out. And that last slide is just my contact information. So if anybody has any questions specific to the program about the wait list, please reach out to me, and I will try to answer those. And if I don't have the answer, I will find the answer for you and get back to you. So do we have questions? I didn't have any polls during mine, so.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We do have a couple questions.
Okay.
One is, okay, Abiola. Christina, will MDOD accept an IL specialist / housing case manager at the SILS word as proof of disability as per their observations during the intake process? In parentheses, I thought I saw something about this in the HERTH Act, which is, HERTH Act is in regard to homelessness.
So I'm not sure that I understand that question, because the HERTH Act is like you stated about homelessness.
Yeah.
Are you asking if? So I know on part of the pre-screening, they want you to confirm someone's disability. I think that might be actually is that what you're referring to, Abiola?
She says both. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Abiola. Let's see. Since you have to be disabled and homeless for the 811 pre-application, what do you mean by that? I'm not really sure, because people who apply have to have a disability, but not everyone that applies is homeless. Like, some individuals are living in nursing facilities, some are, do you want me to unmute you, Abiola, so you can kind of explain what you mean? Okay, all right. Okay, I asked to unmute you.
Okay, all right. Hello. I just was seeing that when you have to provide the documentation, I shouldn't have said pre-application. When you have to provide the documentation, to move to the next phase of the 811 application process, then the applicant is asked to provide either written verification of the disability from the professional, a healthcare professional, or something from the Social Security Administration, or a copy of the receipt for a disability check, and then the fourth piece is it says intake staff recorded observation of a disability that no later than 45 days of the application for assistance is confirmed and accompanied by evidence in this. So I just thought, oh, well, you know, sometimes, especially now, because of the difficulty that our consumers are having to get the disability, the SSDI letter or the award letter, then I'm wondering whether or not that the staff observation could suffice at least until the SSDI letter or some other letter comes in.
So Abiola, the statement that you just read, where are you reading that from?
The HUD website.
What specific, because you had referenced the Hearth Act, which is not, I mean, not to say that it's not related to the work that we do, but I'm not sure. The Hearth Act
So,
was passed to consolidate different homelessness programs at HUD and to make homeless assistance more performance-based. So it doesn't really, I'm not sure like what it is that you're.
it's just in terms of what's so so again, because you have to be disabled, at least even to or provide evidence of disability, there's a subsections within the Hearth Act that talk about evidence of the disability that can be provided during the application process.
But that's different from the 811 program, if that makes any sense. Like what you're referring to relates to like the Hearth Act was essentially something that was related to the consolidation of homeless services, which is it's a separate program from 811, which has its own, you know, regulatory components to it. And kind of what I believe what you're asking for, HUD would need to issue guidance as related to the 811 program to indicate that exceptions are possible, which they have done for other programs, you know, with respect to things like income documentation and verification of that information. But we would have to actually look that information up and see. But I haven't heard of anything specific to 811 that's been issued, unless Diane, if you've seen anything that's come out. I have not recently.
Yeah, and again, and I'm just referring back to when a person has been, when we get notice that an individual has been selected for the 811 for the 811 program and to submit an application for a specific unit. I'm sorry, for a specific unit is when we are asked to pull together all of the documentation. Normally, at our Independent Center for Independent Living, we encourage consumers to get all of this documentation and have it ready. But obviously that sometimes that's not the case and they have difficulty gathering it. And so whatever I send back to Christina, you know, would include the proof of disability. So I'm saying that in lieu of that proof, the SSDI letter as proof of disability, in the package that's sent back to Christina, is there something else that you would accept?
But we're not asking for that SSI or SSDI award letter as proof of disability. We're not. I'm not sure why you're saying proof of disability.
This is Diane. Maybe I can help. There is a question on the application when somebody's entered on the wait list for the 811 program that asks the case manager to certify that all the information is correct. One of those things you're certifying that is correct is that the person has a disability that meets the HUD definition, and that HUD definition is posted in the social serve application.
Yes.
When a person's applying to rent an apartment, then we do income verification. That's when the SSI or SSDI award letter is required to verify income. So it's not to verify that a person has disability. It's to verify their sources of income. Does that
Yeah,
help?
that's a good clarification, Diane. And thanks for providing that. Abiola, does that answer your question?
That helps, yes. Mhm.
Okay, good. Good. Okay. All right. So next question I have is from Veronica Lawrence. If you turn down a unit for some reason, will that kick you out of the program or put you back on the list for the next opportunity? I'll let Christina answer that.
So it doesn't kick you off of the wait list unless it's happened multiple times. And even when it's happened multiple times, we look at the reasons behind, why you're, refusing the unit. If it's something like, it hasn't happened often. I think it's happened less than a handful of times that we've, removed somebody for refusing units. But we always look at the why. Maybe somebody wasn't ready to leave the nursing facility. Something happened with their health and it changed and they couldn't leave. So, if that's happened a couple of times, that's not a reason that we would kick someone off of the wait list. And I remove them from the wait list, kick them off, remove them from the wait list. But if they refuse the unit, the person still keeps all of the date and time stamp. None of that information changes. They go right back onto the wait list and they would be contacted, for the next unit, if their name comes up on the wait list for that housing opportunity. But like I said, it really depends on the reasons why, they're refusing to move into the unit.
All right. Another question. What did you say the security deposit was?
So the security deposit is an amount that is equal to 1 month's total tenant payment or $50, whichever is greater at the time of the lease signing. So, without using that, if you can pull up that 50059 that Karen had included in her presentation, one of the sections on there was actually the tenant, the total tenant payment. So, if you want to do a real quick, math on this. So if you take somebody that receives SSI and you figure out 30% of their total, household income, that 30% would essentially be that total tenant payment. That's not always accurate because, there's deductions, there's, the deduction for having a disability. There's, different things like that. So, but it's going to be 30%. So if I don't know, Chelsea, if you can pull up that 50059, it was on there on that section, but that's essentially how that's figured out.
All right, great. Okay, next question. I'm looking in the Q&A. You stated that child support had to be verified even if stated they are not receiving. If an executed statement that they are not receiving support is provided, does a printout from child support enforcement still need to be obtained? You also mentioned food stamps. If they are not counted as income, why are we asking for verification? And then the person said again, a continuation, they said, to clarify the above, they are stating there is no case and they do not receive. I understand if there is a case and they state they are not receiving, then additional information should be obtained in order to not count the full support order amount. So I guess.
You want me to jump in on that?
Yeah, Karen, can we lean on you for that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a perfect world, everything that we asked would be answered accurately the first time, and we would not discover upon investigating further that there might be some alternative facts out there about their answers. And so this falls into that category of having to verify, even if the person says, I don't have income and I don't have a court order. So our company, our compliance department, and I would expect most others, is there's still going to be a requirement to have to verify the fact that there isn't income to be received. And that's also largely because of the potential for somebody to confuse the question, are you eligible for such income, with are you receiving? It's just too common that they confuse those questions, and the question they answer is, am I receiving, instead of am I eligible to receive? And the problem with that is the fact that if they are somehow eligible to receive it, they may start receiving it at some point. And now our projected annualized income is incorrect. So we just have to, part of dotting all of our I's and crossing all of our T's, we have to verify all of it.
So Karen, what about the part about food stamps?
Oh, I'm not utilizing food stamps as a income calculation.
No, it's not part of income calculation, but I've seen lots of properties request the letter from social services about food stamps.
Does anyone else have any information they want to share about that? I don't recall requesting a letter to speak to food stamps personally. I could be mistaken.
Not seeing anyone jumping in for that. But if, for the person who made those comments in the Q&A, they were listed as anonymous, but oh, here's someone says, applicants can check yes to public assistance. Okay. If you want to either email, myself or Christina separately, we can assist in trying to get some clarification on that. The person who said applicants can check yes to public assistance added, they can check yes even when receiving food stamps. Corinne Howard says, never heard that. Food stamps aren't normally calculated.
I think some of the confusion might be that there might be forms that ask a question.
Yeah.
But those forms may be universal forms applied for different purposes. But I can assure you that we're not utilizing food stamps in an income calculation.
Okay, gotcha. Caprice Fitchett says the 4350 does not allow us to count food stamps, however, defer to your company's policy. And then someone had asked, will we receive a link for the next webinar? For those who are registered for a mailing list, you should have already received like a mail out to describe the next webinar, and then there should be a link to register for that webinar. If you would like, I would, if you could please just shoot me an email if you did not receive that invitation and the link, so I can send it out to you directly. That would be great. And then we can also get your information to add you to our mailing list if you would like. I'm not sure. Someone had commented the confusion is that in the training it was stated to get a statement regarding food stamps. And then another comment, we don't count food stamps, but when applicants check food stamps, we double check with social services to show they are or are not receiving cash assistance. Okay. Okay. Looks like there's a little bit of variation in this response. So we can have an offline conversation about specific issues, perhaps that people are running into. All right, with that said, we are at 12 p.m. So this is our stop time. If anyone has any additional questions that we did not get a chance to address, I think we had gotten through everything in the Q&A and chat. But if there's something that comes up after this meeting and you would like to reach out to either Christina or Karen, They did provide their contact information. We will also have these PowerPoints available for anyone who has registered and attended the webinar, so you can go ahead and take a look at those. We'll email those out to the group, and then we will also have a recording of this webinar posted on our website for people to refer to at a later time in case you need a refresher. That is still pending. I'd like to kind of get all of the webinars posted at the same time. So I'll make sure that everyone who's signed up for our mailing list gets that as well. Okay, well, thank you for everyone who attended and participated. This was a great session. I'm glad that we had so many participants and some really excellent questions. Thank you both to our presenters, Karen Scott and Christina Bulliard. Excellent presentations, extremely helpful information. And I look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday at 10 a.m.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day,
Thank you
everyone.
for joining the call today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.